Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first day of the World Ag Expo. And thank you for joining us for our seminar today. My name is Carly Lewis, and I am the agronomist sales representative at Livestock Water Recycling. I would also like to introduce my co-presenter, Nick Fasciola, who has joined me from 3 Degrees. Nick is a licensed mechanical engineer, bringing over a decade of experience working with carbon offset projects and greenhouse gas accounting specifically for dairy farms. During today's seminar, we will be going through all the ways that your manure can add value to your operation, from data analytics to renewable energy to carbon credits. We are committed to helping producers not only manage their manure, but measure it and make money from it. After all, there are dollars in the data, and we want to help unlock that for producers. Before we get into the presentation, I would first like to ask you all a question. How much do you think your manure is currently making you? Feel free to go ahead and put your answers into the comment section. Do you think option A, B, C, or D? Now, what if I told you your manure could add tens of thousands of dollars to your revenue stream? There are many different ways that your manure can be utilized to add value to your operation. We will spend some time breaking down a case study done for a dairy farm that has added over $450,000 to their farm using their manure. In today's presentation, we will go through a manure nutrient analysis so that you can see what the numbers actually mean for you and how nutrient separation can increase the value of manure. Next, we will present a West Coast dairy case study to illustrate how changing a farm's manure footprint is unlocking tens of thousands of dollars a year in carbon credits. We will introduce a modern, economical hub and spoke approach to the renewable natural gas market, where farms no longer have to install anaerobic digesters to reap the benefits of biogas. Finally, we will explain how manure data leads to actionable insights to help improve the decisions made on your farm. When we talk about the value of manure, I am sure that we can all agree that the nutrients in the manure is the first thing that comes to mind. But there are many more ways that manure is a profit powerhouse. Along with the nutrients in the manure, it also improves the overall soil health by adding organic matter, which is an integral part of those nutrients becoming plant available. You can also look at how being able to separate the nutrients available in your manure will help you to make more strategic decisions about where those nutrients are going. When you separate out the nutrients into different products, there's added value created. These products are nutrient dense that can be sold as fertilizer products to surrounding farms or greenhouses. When you start looking at manure treatments, you can look to the carbon credit world for another way that manure can add to your revenue stream. The last way that manure could add value is through the renewable natural gas industry and anaerobic digesters. This can happen through either the sale of energy created into the grid, or it can be used on farm to help save you money. So let's start out with the most common way that manure adds value to your operation: nutrients for your crops. The first step to utilizing this added value is to get your manure tested to see what you're working with. A nutrient analysis of your manure will give you values of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, dry matter percentage, and micronutrient levels. It also may give you a value for your organic matter content of your manure. All of this information is valuable to you as you make your fertilizer plans and calculate out your application rates. Soil tests are also an important component of this, as they are what give you a peek into what is in your soil. You should use both of these analyses to ensure that you are utilizing nutrients to the potential that they have. If we take a look at this analysis of dairy manure, you can see that the dry matter is 1.12% and the moisture is 98.88%. The nitrogen is usually broken down into three different values of ammonium nitrogen, organic nitrogen, and total nitrogen. However, this analysis just gives the total nitrogen of 11.58 pounds per thousand gallons. There are also phosphorus and potassium values of 5.58 pounds per thousand gallons and 18.62 pounds per thousand gallons, respectively. These values are given as the plant available P2O5 and K2O. This analysis also gives a sulfur value of 2.12 pounds per thousand gallons. Now, if your analysis includes micronutrients, which this sample does not, it is important to take a look at these, but know that typically these values are lower than the macronutrients. These are still important to note because micronutrients are extremely important to plant growth. Different crops will have different needs, so knowing your crop plans and your soil test results will allow you to make decisions about the crop yield that you're aiming for. The nutrients in the manure are definitely important, but they're not the sole contributor to your crop yields and to the soil health. Manure is an organic material that adds organic matter and carbon to the soil. Soil organic matter is responsible for the overall health of soil. By adding organic matter, you will increase the soil tilth, which results in better root growth. It also helps with water retention and increases the cation exchange capacity for your nutrients. These are the types of added values that are harder to put a dollar amount to, but ultimately they're a part of increasing your crop yield. If managed well, it can help to decrease your commercial fertilizer needs, which in turn saves you money. To take this one step further, what if you could separate the nutrients in your manure into two different products? We have found that the value of nutrients in your manure can be increased when the nutrients are separated with a system like our first wave. This system separates the manure into two different products. The first product is a solid that has 95% of the total phosphorus from the manure and also contains organic nitrogen. This can be spread to fields at 25%. The other is a clear, odorless liquid with plant available nitrogen and potassium that can be irrigated through a pivot. With a full plant system, you can also achieve clean potable water from your manure along with the two products that I mentioned. Being able to have a solid product that is roughly 8% of your total volume that also contains phosphorus and organic nitrogen allows you to spread on fields that are further away that may not have gotten manure in the past due to their distance. This solid will supply a crop with plant available phosphorus, but will also help to build the soil phosphorus levels. The organic nitrogen will also add nitrogen to the crop, but will mainly allow you to build your soil nitrogen levels while adding organic matter that will help to mineralize the nitrogen in coming years. So even though the nutrients are helping to boost your yield in that first year of application, it is also helping to build your nutrient levels in the soil for future years. You are also able to apply a liquid with ammonium nitrogen and potassium through pivot irrigation and utilize these plant available nutrients on growing crops. Both of these products help to decrease your need for commercial fertilizer because you're able to dial in on your application rates to avoid either over or under applying another nutrient. Another added value to separating your nutrients is that you now have a highly concentrated fertilizer product that can be sold. Both the solid and liquid products are great on your fields, but can also be utilized on specialty crops, in greenhouses, or in a garden as an organic fertilizer. Now let's get down to the important part. What does this all pencil out to? For this, I have pulled a value proposition for a West Coast dairy that has implemented our first wave manure treatment system to help them create added value from their manure. They saw an increase in their pregnancy rates of 1% due to the elimination of barn gases, which in turn reduced stress for their cows. From their solids that they produced, they were able to sell these for $15 a ton to surrounding farms as a fertilizer high in phosphorus and organic matter. They were also eligible for voluntary greenhouse gas credits, which Nick will explain more about in a few moments. They also saw an overall increase in their milk production due to a reduction in odor, stomatic cell count, and mastitis infection. And by irrigating their liquids onto their corn crop, they were able to see an increase in their yields. Altogether, with an enhanced compost and the overall environmental impact decreased for the farm, they saw an added value of $450,994. I also want to mention a few other ways that manure can add value to your farm that are a little harder to put a value to. These include the relationships with your neighbors. By adding in a manure treatment system, you can reduce the odor from your operation, which can have a positive influence on your neighbors. It can also help you to increase your herd size without having to build more manure storage. This means you don't have to sacrifice valuable cropland to build a lagoon. There will also be less trucks on the road hauling manure because the solids are nutrient dense but are reduced in volume. This will result in less wear and tear on your municipal roads. By separating your nutrients, you can also meet regulations easier, whether it is in regard to your lagoon storage space or spreading the nutrients onto your fields. You can precisely apply your phosphorus and nitrogen without worrying about over applying the other by separating the nutrients in your manure. With a focus on sustainability and environmentally friendly food products, consumers are more and more interested in knowing how their food is produced. The big name companies are also focusing in on their carbon footprint and how they can be a part of a more environmentally friendly food production chain. This all trickles down to the farm level eventually, and it is the way that food production seems to be headed. I will now pass the presentation over to my co-presenter, Nick, who will go into further detail about the world of carbon credits and how your manure can make you money from them.
Thanks, Carly. Hello, I'm Nick Fasciola. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about how to monetize the reductions in methane for the benefits of climate change. Next slide, please. So as most of you probably know, manure breaks down in open lagoons and it creates methane. This is caused by the anaerobic breakdown or the absence of oxygen. And so what we're seeing across the entire country, but this slide here is showing California, is that when looking at the methane emissions in the state, the dairy sector is responsible for half of those methane emissions. Roughly a quarter is from the manure and a quarter is from enteric fermentation. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed in the states looking at different ways to do this. And the reason is that methane is 25 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. But I think we should probably view this as an opportunity, to make big reductions in greenhouse gases, especially when there's environmental markets that will support this, and that's what I'm going to get into. For adult cows and freestall barns, I like to think of my rule of thumb that lagooning their manure, if you're lagooning all of their manure, will generate roughly 7 to 9 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per cow. Okay, next slide. So what can be done about this situation? There's generally two options to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from manure at CAFOs. The first would be to capture the methane and burn it, right? So these are the anaerobic digesters that many of the audience might already have. Um, but it's also a very expensive option. They can be in the tens of millions of dollars, and they require significant operational expertise. Now that you're seeing a lot of um, renewable natural gas being produced off these digesters, I mean, those plants are going to be, uh, far more expensive than that even. Um, these also require air permits, which if you're in the Central Valley, that's not easy to do. It can take a couple years and many headaches to get those permits. Um, and that's why I want to talk about option number two, which is just avoiding methane generation altogether. Um, so this could be keeping manure out of the lagoons. Um, that's generally going to be impractical for most farms. But if you actually just remove the volatile solids out of the manure, um, and then the cleaner liquid continues on to the lagoons, that's actually going to be removing um, a fair amount of methane. Traditionally, if we're talking about traditional solid separation with slope screens and screw presses, that's only going to be removing about 17 to 25% of the methane. Um, so the LWR first wave is closer to 90% effective at removing the volatile solids. So if you go back to that rule of thumb, at a rate of 9 tons per cow, um, which was coming off the lagoons, then you install first wave, you can generate emission reductions of 8 tons per cow, leaving you with only one. So that 8 tons per cow is the important number that we're going to look for opportunities. Okay, next slide. This is a case study from a unnamed actual farm that is located on the West Coast. They've got 3,400 head. Um, all these animals are housed indoors, and all of the manure is collected and diverted to the lagoon. So then they install an LWR system. The manure will pass through the first wave and then through a screw press. Um, Now the liquids are stored in the lagoon, which can actually be applied through center pivots. That's a separate co-benefit. The solids then are going to be not stored in the lagoon. They'll be composted, applied as bedding, and the nutrient-rich solids can be sold off-site. Um, Emission reductions at this farm were modeled as 23,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. Um, Remember, we're reducing methane, but we're measuring everything in CO2 equivalent. So that actually equates to 23,000 carbon credits, carbon offsets every year. So the actual carbon credit generation will vary. When you look at farm to farm, it depends on pre-existing separators, whether all the manure is collected or if some is left on dry lots, um, and actual performance of the equipment. Okay, next slide. So what does it take to generate a carbon credit? First, you're going to install the new equipment. Then you're going to connect with an offset project developer like 3 Degrees, who can register the project on a registry. And then what we'll do is we'll assemble all the information about the equipment and the project installation, um, put together a plan for how we're going to be monitoring the emission reductions, write a really long report, and then that has to go through what's called a validation, where it's essentially an audit. The auditor is going to make sure that the plan is robust and following all the rules of the program to generate carbon offsets. Okay, once you get all that in order, you're going to operate for a full year. You'll be monitoring and collecting certain performance data. And then at the end of that year, you'll compile all the performance data, quantify these emission reductions. And again, this is what the project developer will do. This is what me and my team does. Quantify those emission reductions, write it up in a report, Again, hire an auditor to verify the accuracy of the emission reductions. And that process is going to take another 4 to 5 months. Um, Ultimately, the verifier can sign off, yes, I agree, this was exactly 23,022 metric tons. Um, and then that's when the credits are issued. So if you count all those, all that timing, that's actually about a year and a half the after the equipment was installed when we finally are able to transact a sale and bring that cash flow in. Um, so so that's how long it takes the first time, and then you'll generally repeat this process every year, and so you'll have annual cash flow. Next slide. Um, okay, so then what about monetizing the carbon credits? So first of all, you've got a cost of the credit production. Um, so generally, you want to make sure that you're not doing carbon offsets unless it's going to be profitable. There's going to be an upfront cost to put all of the plan in place and everything. There's going to be the ongoing cost of operating the equipment and maintaining the equipment. Um, and then finally you have to pay for these auditors. You have to do certain monitoring that's required by the process to generate the credits. um, and so what we're trying to do here is um, make sure that the projected offset revenue stream is greater than the cost of going through the process. So unfortunately, this probably leaves out some of the smallest farms. I mean, if you've got a couple hundred head, this might not be a profitable business. But if you're, maybe well over 1,000 head, you should be just fine. Um, so in any case, these are largely fixed costs to go through the process, um, and scaling is definitely beneficial. Next slide. So what about the carbon offset market? It is a market. Um, it's a voluntary market. You may have heard about California's cap and trade program, which is a compliance market. Um, those credits are of a very different nature. They're commoditized, so the pricing is going to be uh, kind of the same across the board, depending on what day it is, and they're generally easy to sell. Um, the voluntary credits are completely based on what you're able to sell somebody on a case by case basis. So the price will be negotiated at every sale. Some customers are going to be willing to pay a lot more than others to support a specific project. Um, so while on one hand this doesn't add a lot of price certainty, um, there are ways to structure an agreement with the project developer that offers you that price certainty. So, for example, we can offer our project partners a fixed price, um, and maybe we'll buy for one price, and then it's on us to sell it at a dollar profit. Um, and sometimes we'll just say, hey, let's go find a buyer, and then we'll do a revenue share. Um, just to give you a sense, that the total U.S. voluntary market is roughly 10 million tons sold every year, generating about $30 million of revenue. I know a lot of farmers I've talked to would prefer that the carbon offsets help pay for the capital cost of installing the system. So I'd say in general, that's an exception to the rule, to get a prepayment for carbon offsets. It can be done. We've certainly done this before, but by and far the most common structure is to um, make the credits, sell the credits, and then that brings in the cash flow. Next slide. Okay, I guess I said a little bit about the voluntary price dynamics, but just to be a little bit more specific, the there's kind of two buckets that I think of with voluntary carbon offsets. There's generic credits, when somebody says, "Hey, I want to buy some credits. I don't care what kind they are. I just want them to be cheap." Um, there are credits like that that sell for $1.50, maybe $2. Um, Whereas the charismatic credits will sell for a very wide range of, I mean, it says 3 to 7 here, but um, they can sell for even higher than that. But that's when you're talking about specific projects. Think of maybe somebody wants to offset their emissions and they're looking in their supply chain. Um, so that's a good thing for the food and beverage sector, for example. If there's a customer of ours who wants to support an offset project within their supply chain, they might be willing to pay more money for it. Um, they might they might want to see some photos of the project and maybe maybe a story that comes along with it that really helps them feel like their dollars are going to good places, right? So carbon offsets cover all this. Carbon offsets can be just a straight commodity, and they can also be a story that comes with the commodity. So I'd say that credits of this kind, by installing the LWR system, would definitely fit to the charismatic bucket. Um, and so, especially with all of these co-benefits that Carly was mentioning, these are things that we'll use in building a story to try to get on the upper end of the charismatic price range. So what does this mean for our West Coast dairy? Um, so lagooning at this baseline was, I think we said 9 before. Well, let's say it was 7 tons per cow. And let's say they had 95% reduction achieved through the first wave system. And let's say they got a sale for $4 for every credit. So I don't have the total number here, but that's $20 per cow every year, maybe a little bit more than that. So that could definitely be interesting. Slide. So there's been a lot of talk about California's other program, the LCFS, the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, where everyone is creating renewable natural gas and putting their digester gas in the pipeline. So the LWR system can also add value to those projects, even after they already exist. Using a 3,200 head dairy as an example, if you're able to add a first wave after the digester, so the digester effluent was going to an open lagoon, and there's still going to be some methane emissions coming off that lagoon. So then if you insert a first wave in between that system and you put even cleaner water in that lagoon, you can improve the pathway and the carbon intensity score. I did some rough math on this and found that the credit volume can increase by 6%. And unlike the carbon offsets, these LCFS credits are worth $200 today. So with 24,000 annual credits achieved by that 6% increase, we're talking an added $288,000 per year just by installing a first wave on the back end of a digester at one of these RNG plants. Next slide.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for explaining to all of us more about carbon credits. And speaking of biogas, I found this data and thought it was very interesting. As you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, there are some feedstocks listed: dairy, landfill, and diesel. Dairy has the lowest carbon intensity score out of all three of them. Dairy renewable natural gas tends to be awarded the better carbon intensity scores over landfill renewable natural gas due to greenhouse gas emission reductions that we've talked about. And credit values are usually higher for these lower carbon intensity fuels, which all means that this is the best way to create value from your manure off of your farm site. Renewable identification numbers create an additional revenue stream for developers of biogas energy assets, as they provide an infusion of cash with no additional capital. For every gallon of renewable fuel created, a renewable identification number is issued to the producer, and these can then be sold to an obligated party, such as a fuel refinery. Our first wave system concentrates 85% of digestate's volatile solids into only 5% of the original liquid volume. This means that you're capturing a value that can result in 2 to 3 times more gas production. Increased revenue can be generated by taking in solids and collecting a tipping fee from neighboring farms. With a hub and spoke approach, operations can independently install the first wave or plant system to treat the bioliquids. The solids fraction can then be economically trucked to a central digester hub. This model enables multiple producers to capitalize on new revenue from RNG production without the capital outlay of their own digester, the expense of trucking large volumes of dilute liquids, or installing a manure pipeline. There's also the opportunity to treat the digestate product with plant. The nutrient and water recovery capacity is the highest on the market, with over 95% of the phosphorus and 50% of the nitrogen is concentrated in the solids for efficient movement of nutrients. It also results in a liquid fertilizer containing ammonium and potassium that can be applied inexpensively to fields that are close to the digester. If you're interested in connecting with a RNG developer or a gas pipeline opportunity, please don't hesitate to reach out to us after our seminar today. As we look to the future of agriculture, we all know that technology will lead the way. Data is an integral part of technology and is an important part of how we make decisions day to day. Data has been an important component in crop growth and livestock practices, but is yet to be utilized in the manure space until now. Plant is a fully automated and uses sensors that read the manure in real time. It takes this information and combines it with data from the surrounding environment, and then using our algorithms, adjusts the system in response. This automation reduces operator time by relying on automation to do the work and uses the power of machine learning to create the best possible economics. Our machine learning module, LOIS, was recently named AgTech Breakthrough Predictive Analytics Solution of the Year for 2020, and it is being featured as one of the top 10 new products this week at the Expo. If you want to learn more about LOIS, make sure to check out our seminar on Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our system is designed to be operated from any mobile device, and after treating manure for over a decade, we are leveraging our historical manure data to create even more value for farms. The manure data is captured, is communicated to our cloud-based analytics module. The analytics reporting can be viewed from our My Plant app or our data dashboard. Our data analytics program has been created to provide producers with actionable insights that make decision-making easier for your operation. We would like to thank everyone for joining us today for this seminar. We hope that you're able to take away at least one way that your manure can increase your revenue, and that you will start to view your manure as a profitable product. Thank you to the World Ag Expo for hosting us today and for putting on this amazing event online so that people can still connect despite the times. And we will now answer any questions that you may have.